Listen, you need to move out. We've decided to stay in his house. What? It's too crowded for us newly married couple to have everyone here, and this isn't even your house. If you don't like it, find your own place. Sophie can stay here if she wants. Kicking her out is unfair. My mom's words made me feel relieved, but my brother and his wife were still unhappy. This happened 5 years ago when my younger brother, right out of college, brought his girlfriend home and said he wanted to marry her. My name is Sophie. I'm 33 now, and my brother, who's 5 years younger, got married right after college. His wife was still in college, 3 years behind him. My brother and his wife really wanted to tie the knot right away, but our parents suggested waiting until she finished college. Oddly enough, her parents didn't mind either way. It seems like she's a carefree spender, and her folks just want her out of the house as soon as possible. We'll cover her tuition today, but after that, she's your responsibility. So anything other than her education isn't our concern, they said casually, not wanting to bother with rent. The newlyweds chose to stay with our parents. Thankfully, our dad, who used to be well off, owned a spacious old house. With enough space, it wasn't a big deal for them to live together. My dad grew up in a wealthy family, so he never faced money troubles like a regular worker. He hardly shared his thoughts, always wearing a smile and seeming a bit out of touch with reality. Mom often guided him, but I never saw him lose his temper. "I got a talking to from your mom again," he'd say with a chuckle. Dad was easygoing, taking everything in stride, which is probably why he and Mom got along so well. I adored Dad. He'd just laugh along when Mom scolded him. And so began the living arrangement with a newly married couple. My sister-in-law doesn't lift a finger around the house. She doesn't even bother with the vacuum or sorting her laundry from ours. Cooking? Forget about it. She waits for Mom or me to make meals. You could pitch in a bit, you know. I finally snapped, only to be accused of picking on her. "You're intimidating, sis. Maybe that's why you're still single at your age," she quipped, giggling. My brother just joins in her laughter. "At least do your own laundry. Isn't it embarrassing to have someone else wash your underwear, sis?" I thought we were all one big happy family. She'd fake tears for sympathy. My brother always took her side in moments like these. "Sophie, just because Emily is young and cute, don't get jealous and bully her. We're not here to be your servants. Living together means following some rules. Emily's a student, her main focus should be on her studies. We're family, so we should be able to cooperate, right?" He said this without any hint of remorse. Even though Mom suggested they get their own place and help us with rent, he brushed it off. "If we move out, it has to be a fancy apartment. We can't settle for something cheap," such selfishness. When I asked Dad to intervene, all he'd say is, "It's tough for just the two of them to manage. They're still young." And because of that, my brother and his wife felt even bolder. When I hit 30, I got engaged, and it was a stroke of luck. My future husband was a client from work, and we hit it off during meetings. He was thoughtful and kind, so when he asked me out and then proposed, I was over the moon. Finally tying the knot, surprised someone would want you. "Better make sure you don't mess it up," my brother remarked. "Glad you found a buyer. Can't wait for the busybody sister-in-law to be out of our hair." My parents chimed in, blessing our union wholeheartedly. I'd visit my parents occasionally, but my brother and his wife hadn't changed. She graduated the next year but didn't work or help around the house. When I tried to advise her, I was told I was a stranger now and shouldn't meddle. But I had a feeling they weren't leaving because they wanted to keep hold of the family assets. Deep down, they were probably relieved they didn't have to share them with me, now that I was married and gone. However, leaving doesn't mean I forfeited my rights to inherit. My brother and his wife probably understand this, but now that I'm not around, they might feel they can do as they please. When the time comes, I'd gladly give up my inheritance if they take good care of our parents and the house. But for now, I don't see any signs of that happening. About 2 years later, my father's health deteriorated, and he was in and out of the hospital. I pitched in with his care, visiting him as often as I could, but my brother and his wife seemed unconcerned. My father started mentioning his $20 million inheritance, and every time I visited, I noticed my sister-in-law sweet-talking on my father's side, saying, "Hey sis, I'd love to help out too, but Mom handles everything, and I never get the chance." "But you never showed interest in that before, did you?" "That's not entirely true, but don't you think Mom might be trying to keep us out of the loop to control the inheritance? Our parents are really close, and I think Mom wants to handle everything herself. I don't think she's thinking about it that way. Really? So you believe we'll get a fair share when Dad passes? Stop it. Don't talk about such unlucky things. Dad's still with us. I'm really frustrated with my brother and his wife, who seem to only care about money. But it's unclear if my father actually has that much wealth. While her family used to be well off, my father is just a regular salaryman. I can't imagine he has that much saved up. A year later, my father passed away. I hurried to the hospital as soon as I heard his condition had worsened suddenly, but when I arrived, he was already gone. The only solace was seeing how peaceful his face looked. I'm sure he was smiling, being looked after by Mom until the end. You're smiling, right, Dad? You were carefree till the very end. My husband left work early to join me, but my brother and his wife didn't show up at the hospital. When I reached out to my brother, he calmly responded, "If he's already gone, what's the point of rushing there?" My brother and his wife didn't seem to be grieving at the funeral. They were laughing and chatting. Right after the funeral, my brother wasted no time bringing up the topic of inheritance. As a couple, we'll inherit the $20 million from Dad. What? What do you mean? Did both you and Mom give up your shares? Can't we discuss this after the 49th day memorial? The funeral just happened today. Normally, it's better to settle financial matters later. We live in this house as a couple, and I'm the eldest son, so the inheritance is rightfully ours. Bringing this up right after Dad's passing didn't sit well with me. I didn't particularly care about the money, but it angered me that my brother assumed I'd agree with him. Fine, but in return you better take good care of Mom. Who would believe such words? My mother spoke before I could object. It's fine, dear. Arguing about this won't do any good, especially now. But Dad had just passed, and Mom was clearly feeling down. I couldn't just let it slide. This isn't something to decide right now. Let's head home for today, my husband, who had been quietly listening, intervened. I held back until now, but my husband couldn't stand it any longer. That's when we decided to leave. It doesn't feel right, especially after Dad's passing. I understand your feelings, but right now, I'm more worried about your mom. She's usually so strong, but she seems really down. I'm really worried about her too. I couldn't help but wonder why Mom agreed with my brother's stance so easily. Was she swayed by him and his wife? Mom and Dad were always a strong couple. Losing Dad must have hit her hard. Honestly, I'd rather be reminiscing about Dad right now. But my anger towards my brother is clouding everything. Since then, my brother and his wife kept bringing up renouncing the inheritance, but I refused to discuss it until after the 49th day. When the time came, they wasted no time bringing it up again. But once more, Mom urged me to give it up. If Mom says it's okay, then it must be okay, right? Are you sure about this? Won't you regret it later on? After all, Emily is Dad's daughter, so don't worry. Well, yeah, she's your wife. That's not what I meant. I meant she has a right to inherit. At this point, Emily's practically been adopted by our parents. What? I was stunned. When I glanced at Mom, she simply nodded. Adoption by in-laws isn't exactly unheard of, right? It's not common for a bride to be adopted, especially not a son-in-law. If Emily inherits, we'll pay less in inheritance tax than if I were the sole heir. I was shocked that he had thought about it so deeply, wondering when he started planning this. Even more surprising was that Mom agreed. And then they asked me to renounce the inheritance. Maybe Mom, being a mother now that Dad's gone, was worried about the future. But if it's Mom's decision, I suppose I can't argue. So I decided to send in the inheritance renunciation document. I don't want to argue about money anymore. Luckily, my husband isn't one to fuss over it, and he trusts me to make the decision about the inheritance. If renouncing it means Mom can live peacefully from now on, then it's the best choice. About a month later, my sister-in-law called me. It looks like your mom is losing her memory. What? But she's always been so tidy. The house must be a disaster if she's not cleaning. It was hard to believe my mom, who was usually meticulous about cleanliness, could leave laundry lying around and not bother to clean. And after she's just eaten, she yells at me, "I'm hungry. Are you trying to starve me? Can you imagine?" And I'm the one cooking for her. She's turned into a completely different person. Is it true? Have you taken her to the hospital? It seems unbelievable. She gets aggressive when I try to get her out, and it's embarrassing to be seen with her in public. Sam thinks I should just let her be, but I'm the one dealing with her all day and I'm at my wit's end. Honestly, I'm tired of it. So I decided to stop by my parents' house on my way home from work. I was speechless at the sight of my mother, who looked unrecognizable. She was sitting on her bed in dirty pajamas, hair unkempt, with vacant eyes. It's only been a month, but she's changed so much. It's clear she's not herself. Mom, you know who I am, right? What's happened to you? Who are you? My mother asked, tilting her head. This can't be real. I mean, look at her. She should be sitting, right? What's happening? And the room is a mess. How did it get this bad? Well, I don't know about all that, but you guys promised to look after Mom, didn't you? Taking care of an elderly woman isn't part of the agreement. There's no written contract when it comes to caring for parents. What are you talking about? In that case, dear sister-in-law, it's your turn to take care of her. I was going to do that without being asked. Let's go home, Mom, I said, attempting to lead her, but she stubbornly resisted. She wouldn't budge, shaking off my hand. Even when I tried to pull her, she clung to the bed, refusing to move. What's happened to you, Mom? I had no choice but to back off that day. Even when my husband and I returned the next day to fetch her, she still adamantly refused to move. I want to be with your father, she cried. It was hard to believe my mother had become like this. I have a job and can't visit her every day. That's why I want her to come to my house. But she refused to leave her old home. Sometime later, I received a call from my younger brother. Sis, we've moved. Really? Where to? Did you take Mom with you? I wouldn't drag around an elderly woman. She's just a burden. Sam, what's wrong with you? Mom mentioned Dad's valuable securities are in the safe deposit box. If we sell the house, we'll get around $20 million. What? It'll be a problem if Mom stays in that house forever. So sis, get Mom out of there as soon as possible. I'm relying on you. Wait, hold on. What are you saying? So that's the situation. Please take care of mother-in-law. As soon as my sister-in-law, who seemed to have taken over my brother's role, made that statement, the phone abruptly went dead. Despite repeatedly dialing, they didn't pick up. I left work early and rushed to my parents' house to persuade my mother to come to my place. I anticipated her usual resistance, but this time she quietly agreed, which was a relief. It seemed like Mom understood that nobody was staying in that house anymore. She remained silent during the drive home. But when we arrived, she suddenly perked up. Huh? Can I use your bathroom? She asked and hurried inside. I was perplexed and stood there, trying to make sense of it. The mother I just saw was unmistakably the same as before. What in the world is going on? I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. When my mother emerged from the bath, she requested some clothes. I quickly fetched her some of my own and a fresh set of underwear I bought for her. Ah, I feel so refreshed, she exclaimed with a bright smile, drying her hair with a towel. Mom, what's happening? I asked, just as my husband walked in. Like me, he looked stunned at the sight of my mother. Suddenly, my mother burst into laughter. That was quite the performance, wasn't it? I used to be in the drama club in high school. They say to deceive the enemy, you must first deceive your allies, and it seems to be true, doesn't it? So it turned out my mother was feigning senility. But why? I couldn't make sense of any of it. Just wait and see. That couple will do something worse soon. By that couple, do you mean Sam and his wife? Exactly. That couple's relationship is solely built on money. Then my mother proceeded to fill us in on what had transpired. Both my husband and I were amazed by my mother's cunning. The following week, my brother called, furious. Hey sis, you knew about this and didn't say anything, did you? What's going on? What are you suddenly talking about? There's no inheritance from Dad at all. When I checked the safety deposit box Mom mentioned, there were only loan agreements inside. So remember that $20 million? Well, that's actually a $20 million debt. Did you not bother to check? Typical of you, the only son in our family to inherit all of Dad's debts. Well, technically, that's still part of the inheritance. In the past, Dad, being too trusting, had acted as a guarantor for a friend's business without Mom's knowledge. The business failed, and the friend kept borrowing from Dad until it went bankrupt, leaving behind only the debt. And to make matters worse, the friend disappeared without a trace. It turns out that our family home had been put up as collateral due to the debt incurred back then. This might have even contributed to Dad developing dementia. It was only then that Mom found out about it. Dad kept saying there's a $20 million inheritance. Dad's words led my younger brother to mistakenly believe there was a hefty cash inheritance. So he and his wife decided to move in with our parents to seize as much money as possible. Dad, without suspecting anything, agreed to my brother's plan. But Mom saw through my brother's scheme and chose not to object. She knew he was so eager for the inheritance that she could simply hand it over to him. To shield Dad's dementia, Mom deliberately kept my brother and his wife away from him. And after Dad's passing, when my brother and his wife finally showed their true intentions, Mom pretended not to notice to observe their reaction. She bided her time for the right moment. Then I'll renounce the inheritance too. It's too late for that. Did you know you can only renounce an inheritance within 3 months of learning about it? We're well past that period now, so you two will have to shoulder the debt together. Mom had been waiting for this moment. She feigned senility until the deadline for renouncing the inheritance had passed. My brother's only goal in living with Mom was to extract information about Dad's inheritance. When the time came, Mom casually mentioned the safety deposit box as if it had just occurred to her. With the information they needed, my brother and his wife swiftly left the house. All along, they had been playing into Mom's hands. Emily is threatening divorce if she doesn't get any money. But legally, she's Dad's child, so she can't escape the debt even with a divorce, right? I see, but I quit my job, thinking I could live a life of luxury with $20 million. But I don't have that kind of money. Oh dear, you've really gotten yourself into a mess, haven't you? So, naturally you'll help me out, right? Why should I help you? You're the one who pushed Mom and me to renounce the inheritance, so I shouldn't be involved anymore. Well, thanks to you, I'm in this mess. I'm sure Dad is crying tears of joy to have such a dutiful son. Good luck paying back the debt. The family home was seized due to the mortgage, leaving the land and house, worth nearly $720,000, insufficient to cover the debt. My brother and his wife struggled to make repayments while their marriage suffered under the strain of financial stress. As Mom predicted, they eventually divorced, consumed by constant money disputes. Mom agreed to dissolve the adoption, making Emily a stranger to us. She likely hoped this would absolve her of the debt, but reality is unforgiving. Despite the dissolution, Emily still inherited the debt from her father's passing. You deceived me. My sister-in-law stormed in, her anger palpable. However, we hadn't intended to deceive her. Mom was heartbroken to see my brother and his wife happily calculating money instead of mourning their father's death. She remained silent, overwhelmed by their greed. Their behavior served as a cautionary tale of the consequences of unchecked greed. Afterward, my brother continued to pester us for money, prompting us to relocate without informing him. To my surprise, I discovered that Dad had taken out a substantial life insurance policy with Mom and me as beneficiaries. Despite his passing, he had diligently kept up with the premiums. The fact that my brother wasn't listed as a beneficiary left me questioning whether Dad had been aware of the situation all along. Despite his seemingly carefree demeanor, perhaps the true strategist in our family wasn't Mom, but Dad. He had once murmured, "There's a $20 million inheritance. Whether intentional or not, I can't say for certain now. My husband and I used the insurance payout as a down payment on a new home." Meanwhile, my brother and his ex-wife seemed to be working while dealing with pressure from loan sharks. Their troubles were no longer my concern. Even after our move, my brother persisted in contacting us, demanding to know our whereabouts. That's when I mentioned the insurance money. "You renounced the inheritance, so that money should be mine," he shouted. However, inheritance renouncement and life insurance are distinct matters. Unlike inheritance, life insurance payouts go directly to the named beneficiary. I explained this to him and promptly blocked my brother and former sister-in-law's contact details. Now we're enjoying a peaceful life as a family of 3. Mom is thriving both physically and mentally, the epitome of good health. My husband and I pray that she continues to live a long and fulfilling life.